Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, a podcast all about tabletop role-playing games from the perspective of the captain's chair. This episode is brought to you by Texas Beard Company. Use the coupon code GameMaster for a 15% discount at texasbeardcompany.com. One of the most important tools in the GM's toolbox is improvisation. Scott Kellogg returns to the show today to discuss how to use improvisation skills to improve the RPG experience for your entire group. So join me on the journey. Together, we can become game masters truly worthy of the title. Hello, listener. Hello, fellow game master and or player. Welcome to episode 46 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. I'm really excited to be transmitting to you from the Obsidian Monolith today with another great episode about improvisation in your role-playing game. So this is part 2 of a two-part interview with Scott Kellogg. Scott has over 30 years of game mastering experience, and he's also an improvisational musician. So he knows quite a bit about improvisation as a skill set, and he has a lot of great ideas on how you can use those skills in your game as a GM and as a player. If you'd like to hear the first part of the interview, go to episode 45 for that. And I just want to thank Scott for taking the time to talk with me, and I hope you enjoy the interview. So for you, how does preparation differ between an improv or a scripted game?
Well, lately it's been reading the game manuals a lot, just so I can internalize as much of the nuts and bolts of the game as I can, so I don't have to look stuff up.
Sure.
But as an aside, which I think it's important to mention, I have only recently become comfortable with stopping the action of the game to look something up.
Okay.
And before, I just wanted to keep the narrative immersion. The most important thing, would never look something up. I kind of viewed it as a failure on my part to not know everything about the game.
Yeah.
You know, and now with this notion of co-creation and everyone participating more equally, I feel like, hey guys, let's just make sure that we're doing this right, and let's look it up. Let's all look it up together, and we can all learn how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And that was extremely liberating. I did not feel like it was this performance that I was being judged on my ability to be awesome.
Yeah.
But rather an experience that everyone is sharing equally. So with regard to preparation, first of all, you got to know the system. You know, I get that. But I think it's more of an outlook in one's day-to-day life of just being open to receiving information that's around you. You know, all the clues are there. Like where do writers get great ideas? Well, everywhere.
Yeah.
They're open to the possibility of at any moment receiving the greatest idea they've ever had. And I do think that ideas come from some numinous space that is, it sounds like the force, I guess, because it is, but there is some kind of energy field that we're tapping into when we do creative work. And that openness to receiving this information is first and foremost the skill an improvising GM wants to have.
Awesome.
And read that Play Unsafe book as well, which has some great tips.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes so people can check that out. I'm going to check it out because I am, I'm trying to do more of this myself. And I'm like you, I'm trying to find something in the middle, because I agree that the scripted stuff can be really powerful when you use it right. But if that's all you're doing, then it kind of starts to feel like the players don't have the agency that they'd probably like to have.
Exactly. And frankly, it's very difficult to come up with detailed environments on the fly.
Yeah.
And with like a I like the 5-room dungeon model a lot.
Okay.
I use index cards. I can quickly generate, a 2 to 4 hour sessions worth of material, and I have the infrastructure of what I need ready to go. And I can fill in the little details via improvisation. That is a great way to prepare for a mostly improvised game. And if you like creating these 5-room dungeon things, and they don't have to be dungeons, they can be locations or whatever. It's just a conceptual model to have a certain amount of encounters that are related that will take 2 to 4 hours to complete.
Very cool. You mentioned that coming up with detailed environments is a hard thing to improv. So is part of your prep then focus on kind of the setting and environment around kind of what's around where the PCs are at?
That is absolutely the case.
Okay.
And I like to have a number of semi-detailed environments that the players can choose to visit.
Okay.
So, with the 5-room dungeon thing, you write on index cards, then you put the index cards in a box and you take the box to your game. That's a way to do it. You can use Evernote or equivalent program. It really doesn't matter how you do it. And this gets us back into the territory of how people run sandbox games. It's having a lot of different areas that can potentially be visited, but the players can decide amongst themselves what's important.
Cool. I dig it. Yeah, I keep thinking in the back of my mind as we talk about the stuff about this Star Wars thing I'm trying to run, and I'm going to try to do kind of what you're talking about, like finding something in the middle where I'm not really starting out with a scripted story per se, and I'm kind of waiting to see what the players do, and then I'm going to try to build a story around kind of what's already happening and try to tie things together into some kind of narrative. And I think I can do that. The thing that kind of intimidates me about the whole thing is the setting, because the Star Wars galaxy is so huge, and there's tons of places that have been talked about in books and movies and stuff, and then there's tons of places that haven't. And I think having like that shoebox of index cards or whatever would be really vital, so that when they decide to go somewhere, I have something to go from.
Sure. This is a whole nother level of interpretation of improvisation, because when you're working with a pre-existing universe like Numenera, The Strange, Star Wars, Empire of the Petal Throne, any of the D&D universes, any of the White Wolf universes, then there is an implied, I hesitate to say meta plot, but there is an implied glacial movement to very high and low level activities that affect the entire setting over time.
Okay. Yeah.
So then deciding how your players fit in with that is very important, which takes me back to Dungeon World. And I remembered another one of the things that's important in that book.
Okay.
And it's be a fan of your players' characters. So in that game, the characters are considered to be the most important people around.
Okay.
Which is different than working within an established setting where there are very powerful non-player characters running around doing things.
Right. Yeah.
So deciding, where you're going to fit in that, that seems fundamental to running something that's in an existing universe.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You don't want your players to be outshined by Luke Skywalker and Han Solo.
Well, yeah, but I mean, how could that not happen unless somehow whatever they're doing is supporting who's on screen at the moment, And I suspect with the new movie, that's what we'll see.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going to try to do, because surely there were a lot of things happening behind the scenes during the original movies that we just didn't get to see. And for instance, gentleman I talked to on the show a while ago, I think it was Joshua, had mentioned he did a Star Wars campaign about the people who stole the Death Star plans, which is something that kind of happened behind the scenes before episode 4, and it was a very important thing that if that wouldn't have happened, like nothing that happened in the movies could have happened. That's
super cool. Like just pick something that's important in the setting and then have the player characters be the star of that event.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you alter the setting, because in an infinite number of recursions or parallel worlds or whatever, fine. So the entire universe implodes as a result of your player character's actions. Just really, if it's fun,
right?
That's cool,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
But a lot of people get really hung up on this notion of canonical bits in a setting. And I think that can put a damper on improvised play if you're continually checking your own ideas before they come out of your mouth against what you remember being canonically true for the setting.
Right. Yeah.
And that I've experienced that at Empire of the Petal Throne, and eventually I just said, well, I am tired of doing this. I'm going to run it however I run it and not really be concerned with what is true for the environment.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's what you have to do when you're running in someone else's setting, is you got to just make it your own and not be afraid to change anything that you want to.
Or break anything.
Right. Yeah.
I think new improvisers, doesn't matter what it is, music, gaming, acting, I'm sure gaming is a subset of acting in its own way, are probably afraid of making mistakes. And if someone listening to this podcast gets only one takeaway from it, I think it is, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just go further down the direction that you thought was a mistake and see where it ends up. Like there's a saying about jazz music where there are no wrong notes. And the notion is it's how you follow up that note that really matters.
Right.
No one's going to remember the one note. People are going to remember the story that's told overall.
Yeah. Good advice.
Well, that's advice that's been around a long time, because it's very telling about how we operate on a psychological level as humans. We are frightened of making mistakes and receiving some kind of negative judgment from ourselves or others. But really, the core of improvisation is about fearlessness and being genuine. So if you're fearless and you're being genuine, you're going to come up with something that's interesting, at least. It doesn't really matter if people like it or are alienated by it at all, if it's genuine to you. And if you do that for long enough, and this is true in the arts for sure, people come to identify your particular brand of genuine fearlessness as the thing that you do that other people don't do, the thing that's unique to you. So with regard to writing or making sounds or whatever, if you're not thinking about failure and you're not thinking about, well, I don't know this game well enough, or I feel weird acting like a purple elf, I don't know what, it's like, just be that thing. What would that thing do? Don't think about, I'm scared of being this thing because it's weird, which I think a lot of new role players or game masters might be a little sheepish about at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. And you worry, the players won't have fun, or they'll think this is dumb, or they'll figure out what movie I'm ripping off, or
But all that, who cares? I've only recently, after 35 years of GMing, started regularly playing in other people's games. And it has been the most liberating and educational collection of experiences that I could possibly have with regard to gaming. How to present locations with descriptions. It's like when you're on the player side of the screen, it's totally different.
Okay.
Than doing the describing.
Yeah.
Even simple stuff like showing up over time and being a regular part of a group. It's all very different from the perspective of the player. So I think I've become, at least I imagine that I become a better game master as a result. And the most obvious manifestation of this is that I'm just way more relaxed about everything.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, players aren't judging the game master nearly as much as the game master thinks he or she is being judged.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's that monkey mind, ego-based internal soundtrack that is saying, oh man, they know where I pinched this idea. So they know that I just completely mispronouncing whatever word,
Yeah.
None of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
And they're not judging nearly as much as we think. People just want to have fun. They want to hang out, have fun, tell a story.
Yep.
It's really that basic.
And I think if you're a GM and you're worrying about this kind of stuff, then that probably means that you are putting enough effort into what you're doing that your players are going to have a good time. I think the only time I really haven't had a good time at a game as a player is when the GM was just kind of phoning it in and didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah, that's lame. That person did not have extreme self-doubt. That person had extreme ennui, all right?
Yeah, yeah.
The people who have the biggest amount of stage fright, self-doubt, and other internal censoring mechanisms are the people who care the most about doing a great job.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So then why improvisation in gaming is important is because it allows the person who has that level of investment into facilitating a great experience for the players to have a whole nother way of doing things that allows for more relaxation and receptivity instead of always being like you're on stage putting on a show for the players.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because I was just telling my wife the other day, because I just got done running a game and I just felt like drained afterwards. And I told her, I'm like, for me, it feels like I'm performing. It feels like when I would go on stage as a musician and perform in front of a crowd. Like that's kind of how I feel when I'm running a game, especially with like the first game with a new group. You actually feel a little nervous and...
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And this Dungeon World thing was the first time that it had been different. And I've started many campaigns over the years. And it was different this time because the book expressly says, prepare nothing for the first session and just show up. It's like, that was amazing. To me.
Yeah.
That's how free jazz musicians may approach a gig. It's like, we want to play things we have not heard before and we may never hear again. So don't stress out about what you're going to do at the gig.
Right.
Just show up and have your years of training, conditioning, and intuitive, natural creativity just happen. It's really more of an allowing than it is any directed activity. Philosophy, man, is dope.
If you hear clicking sounds, it's me typing all the cool things you're saying to put in the...
Oh, yeah.
That's shown. You have a great way with words. You're not a writer too, are you?
Well, I just started an RPG blog to explore my writing side. I was an English major at Purdue, and, I enjoy writing. I've written songs. I have records out, all that kind of stuff. And tarot, gaming, and music, they all have a verbal component.
Sure. Yeah. So where can we find your blog?
It's isleofesk.com.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to take a quick break to talk about my sponsor, Texas Beard Company. So if you are a bearded nerd like me, or maybe one of your loved ones is a bearded nerd, then check out Texas Beard Company at texasbeardcompany.com. They have all natural beard care products like soaps and oils and waxes and combs and brushes and everything you could ever need to take care of your beard. All their products are made by hand in Texas. You can use the coupon code GameMaster for a 15% discount off your entire order. You also always receive free shipping on all orders over $25. So check out Texas Beard Company at texasbeardcompany.com, and don't forget to use the coupon code GameMaster.
Should I plug my various bands as well?
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love that.
Okay. Well, I am in a punk rock band called Zero Boys. Zero Boys has been around since the late 70s and is justly world famous for the 1982 LP called Vicious Circle.
Cool.
I am not an original member of the band, but I've been with the band since 2012. And there's more information about that at zeroboys.com, as well as all over the web because any band that's been around that long has a lot of evidence of its existence on the internet.
Yeah.
And I have a CD that came out in 2010 called Silver in Their Veins. And I'm also in another band with the singer of Zero Boys called Ask. And we have a 7-inch release out, and we are in the process of working on our full-length LP debut. And I can provide all of those links in a textual format.
Yeah, that'd be great. So do you, I'm guessing, play bass in these bands?
Yeah, that's
from
exactly
your picture?
what I do.
Awesome.
I play the bass in the rock bands. I have recently purchased a hammered dulcimer.
Oh, sweet.
Which is an instrument with which I've been fascinated since high school. And it just came around. I got a good deal, and it'll take a while to learn how to play it, but it's pretty amazing. An acoustic instrument that resonates in a most pleasing way.
Yeah, very cool. I've been wanting to learn bass. I've been learning guitar very, very slowly because I don't practice nearly enough. But yeah, I really dig the bass in about any music that it's in. Well, in any music it's in.
Well, with the bass, I think it's important to decide what you want to do. Really, with anything in life, that's skill-based. It's important to decide what you want to do and then just learn the skills you need to do that thing.
Right.
Everything in our material world is fractal in nature. And by that, I mean everything has an infinite number of details that you can endlessly drill down into and really potentially never surface again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and that was for many, many years in my life a maddening phenomenon because I felt like I had to master a thing before I could do it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do anything if you feel like you have to master it first. But if you put the art first, if you put the thing that you're trying to accomplish first, then you can just acquire the skill set that you need to get the thing done that you're trying to do.
Awesome.
And that is way easier to deal with than thinking you need to be able to play like Jaco Pastorius on the bass before you go play the bass. First of all, no one but Jaco is going to play like Jaco. And no one but you is going to play like you. So if you want to play the bass, get an amp, and find some people to play with.
Yeah.
That is the punk rock way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I would want to do with it, because the one thing I miss the most from music is performing. And I try to explain it to my wife because she's all like, oh, why don't you play your trumpet more? Or why don't you play your guitar more? And I'm like, I just practicing over and over, forever just doesn't do it for me. I have to be with other people. If not performing, at least playing as part of an ensemble, And
that is a direct metaphor or analogy for scripted versus improvised gaming.
Okay.
Because you can sit there and read a 400-page brick of a campaign, which is totally cool if that's your thing. Or you can hang out with some friends and just generate the narrative environment over a couple of beers in 2 hours.
Yeah. A lot more fun.
They're just different things.
Yeah.
And certain people are naturally inclined toward one or the other, and that can shift over time.
Yeah. Maybe a good takeaway point for this is whatever end of this spectrum of scripted versus improvised that you fall on, maybe try to stretch yourself the other way a little bit.
Absolutely. I think that's the middle path. I mean, that is a good path. Yeah,
I agree.
Neither a borrower nor a lender be.
You need to put all your quotes on T-shirts and
yeah. Are you volunteering to be my marketing division, or at least stenographer? There's some I wish I could remember the details because it would be a killer anecdote, but as it is, it's kind of just an anecdote that will wound, maybe cripple you, but not really kill you. But there in the 70s, there was some famous rock and roll ensemble or another who would do typical rock and roll group things, smoke and drink and write and jam and have fun. But there was another person there who would write down interesting things that they say. So anytime something interesting would pass by in the conversation or experience, someone would yell out, "Scribe!" And then it was the scribe's duty to record the most awesome thing that just happened.
That's hilarious. I love it.
Well, it took the onus off the individual to actually witness what they were saying while they were saying it versus just being in the experience and saying things.
Yeah. It's really cool. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome. I really like your perspective, and I really like how, you know, yet again, we can take something that at first glance seems completely unrelated to gaming and pull it in and show how, you know, as an improvisational musician or actor, you are learning skills that directly apply to being a game master. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. It's all connected. All divisions that we see, I think, are illusory.
Yeah.
Everything is connected to everything else. You just have to be perceptive enough to see how those things go together.
Yeah, I agree. Our brains love putting things in little boxes and categorizing them, but a lot of times that is just artificial.
It's limiting, but it keeps you from being eaten by a lion in the jungle.
This is true.
You're able to label the lion as a threat. You know, I get it.
Yeah. But how many of us have to cope with lions in jungles these days? Not many.
Not many. But as a metaphor, that could be just some sketchy looking dude outside CVS.
Sure, that's a good point. There are lions in our urban jungles.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Scott. This is a lot of great food for thought. And this topic of, you know, sandbox versus railroad or improvisation versus scripted is kind of like a recurring theme in this show. It just keeps coming up again and again and again.
I did notice that, and it was prompted to volunteer.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely added a lot to the conversation. Lots of things to think about. Well, that's going to wrap up episode 46 of Game Master's Journey. Thanks again, Scott, for the great interview and taking your valuable time to spend with me on the show. I really appreciate it. Please visit the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com/gamemastersjourney/46 to see links to all the things that Scott is up to, including his various music projects and his blog and all kinds of great stuff. So check that out at starwalkerstudios.com. If you'd like to reach me, you can do so by email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also find me on Google+, just search for Lex Starwalker, and you can find me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker. Again, the website is starwalkerstudios.com. There you can find the show notes for this episode and all the episodes of Game Master's Journey. Within the show notes, in addition to a summary of what I talked about and any links that are relevant to that episode, you will also find our Patreon button and our donate button if you would like to help support the show. I really appreciate all the patrons and people that make donations. You'll also find the iTunes and Stitcher buttons that will take you to the show on iTunes or Stitcher, where you can subscribe and leave a review. I really appreciate everyone who leaves reviews. Thank you very much. And at the bottom of the show notes, you'll find a link to our Google Plus community where you can join with a bunch of other tabletop RPG fans and listeners of the show to talk about tabletop RPGs, as well as get updates to what's going on with Game Master's Journey. You can also find links to my YouTube channel where I post actual plays of I've done Numenera, I've done The Strange, I've done D&D, I've done Star Wars, so all kinds of actual play goodness on my YouTube channel. I also have a few tutorials, things like how to run a game on Google Hangouts, how to set up Roll20, just things like that. Really basic tutorials, but I've been getting a lot of great feedback on my tutorials. People seem to really like them. So maybe I should do more of them. You'll also find a link to our free 30-day trial of Audible books at the bottom of the show notes and our Amazon referral link. So once again, I want to thank you so much for listening to the show and patronizing Starwalker Studios. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy bringing quality gaming and hobby content to you every week. It's great fun. So I hope that this week you have a chance to play your favorite RPG of choice. I will be back next week with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.